So I'm pretty sure all of you have already heard about the VCHA situation, and this is certainly not an update that I wanted to make because we previously to this had heard some good news about VCHA potentially coming out with an album sometime next year. Now, about 2 months ago, I actually did make a video on VCHA talking about what I think happened to them and why they were gone for so long and what was going to happen to them in the future. But even back then, I could not have predicted that this was the situation that they were going through. I know that I'm a little bit late to covering this entire situation, but part of that has to do with the fact that it is a very serious topic and I wanted to cover it very carefully. I didn't want to just, jump to conclusions and just talk about it the day it came out. But also, I wanted to wait for JYP to make a response. They have made a response now, and it is a very interesting response. I don't know if it was a good response, but we are definitely going to cover that towards the end. But I want to start with the lawsuit because that is pretty much the meat of this entire situation. And it is 77 pages long. I read through the entire thing so that you don't have to, but it's not that big. I know 77 pages seems like a lot, but realistically, like 40 of those pages are just the actual JYP contract that KG signed, and the other 20 pages are like a bunch of summary of the topics that are discussed in the first 10. So realistically, even though it looks like a lot, it's really just like 10 pages worth of context that is necessary to understand everything that is going on. So let's start at the beginning. This case is being handled by the state of California, with KG and her representatives being treated as the plaintiffs and JYP USA Incorporated being treated as the defendants, obviously because they're the ones receiving the lawsuit, so they're the ones that are going to have to defend themselves from the claims that we're going to go through right now. The claims are as follows: child labor exploitation, which includes violation of child labor laws, failure to pay minimum wage, failure to provide breaks, failure to provide a safe work environment, wage theft, overtime violations, unjust enrichment, conversion, accounting, failure to maintain records / provide accurate wage statements. Then we have child neglect and abuse, which includes intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, unfair business practice, child endangerment. They are also requiring a jury trial, which I think is really smart because that means real people will have to go there. People from the state of California will have to reside and watch the case play out, and they will decide the outcome of the entire case pretty much. This case being handled in California is actually really important because California, and I guess more specifically LA and Hollywood, are seen as the entertainment capital of the world. And there have been many like child actors and minors and young performers and artists that have become famous by moving to LA. Over the century, there have been so many cases of children being exploited in one way or another. And to prevent that, a lot of laws have been put in place to protect these kids. Some of these laws JYP has potentially broken. Now, the first thing that they try to do here in the lawsuit is try to bring up these instances of child exploitation. And the first thing that they bring up is a incident that happened on September 14th, 2023, where a dance teacher forced KG to repeat a dance move hundreds of times until she tore a tendon in her shoulder. KG was also not allowed to drink water throughout this entire time. The other members of VCHA were allowed to drink water, but KG was not. Perhaps there was some kind of bias against her. Maybe the instructor was trying to teach her a lesson, but regardless of this, not giving her a water break is in direct violation of California's social norms, regulations, and laws. They also say that part of the reason why they're even doing the lawsuit to begin with was because the contract that KG is under is an unconscionable contract for the services of a minor. And this is verbatim, by the way. This is directly from the contract itself. But they say, we put the word services in quotes because a contract for slavery of indentured servitude in the 18th century would have been more conscionable than the contract that JYP induced a minor to sign. That is an insane quote. But honestly, as you get into this and as you learn what she actually experienced, you begin to realize that they're not exaggerating when they say this. KG entered into a contract with JYP because JYP offered her an opportunity for stardom and success, which is what I would imagine every idol is offered, and it's probably the reason why every idol decides to become an idol in the first place. But in this case, JYP agreed to follow the California laws and the standards set by SAG-AFTRA, which obviously in many of these situations, they have violated. For example, JYP agreed to give her a base pay, kind of like a minimum hourly wage, but they just decided not to do that. Like, they just straight up said, we're not going to pay you. And the times that they did pay her, all of that money went right back to the company because the company claims that they needed to recoup the costs that they were investing into the group. So KG was basically paying herself, or in other words, working for free, even though she was working 12+ hour days and going overtime all the way up until midnight. Now, from my understanding, this part of the contract isn't anything new. In fact, I'm pretty sure that every single idol in the K-pop industry has this exact same part of the contract in their contract. And that's because that's part of the business model. You place these idols into debt the minute that they debut, and they have 7 years. It's almost like you give them a time bomb and you give them 7 years to pay off that debt by being successful. And if they're not successful, well, guess what? They still have to pay off that debt somehow. The thing that makes this part of the situation worse is the fact that the company was really adamant about the girls living together in LA. LA prices are expensive. And you want to know how much the price of the house that they paid for cost? It was $2.5 million. That's a lot of money. And guess who was paying for the house? It was VCHA. VCHA was paying for the house that they did not even choose to live in. Now, according to the data that we have here in the lawsuit, individually, KG has to pay back $500,000 herself, which, again, it's a lot of money for someone that is a minor. She's 17. And when this house was bought, she was even younger than that. But $500,000. Initially, KG did not want to move into the house because she didn't want to take on the debt, but also because according to the agreement, moving in was optional. However, a lot of the staff and the company kept pressuring her to move in because they kept saying things like, oh, it's going to help the group a lot if you guys all live together. So she moved in and she took on the debt. One of the more interesting quotes comes from Daniel Hong, who was like, I guess, an employee that was managing the group. And there was a lot of concerns about Kay Lee, who was like 14 at the time. She was really young. A lot of viewers and fans and just the public in general were concerned about how they were going to handle her and whether they were going to treat her with care. He says, there are concerns regarding quality because we're competing with other groups that are not necessarily following the same guidelines like we do. But it is something that we cannot cross. We are not going to cross that line. It's really funny to read this because he said this a year ago, and a year later, we now know that they have crossed that line several times. The next part of this lawsuit goes through KG's daily schedule, which includes her waking up at 7 a.m., going to school for 3 hours, and then immediately coming back to practice up until 7 p.m., which is the official end time. But often it would go further than that to like 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11, 12 midnight even. And yeah, this would pretty much not give her any free time for herself and cut down on the amount of sleep that she would get every single day. The group was also denied proper meals in order to keep them as thin as possible, which again, if you've been following K-pop, this is nothing new. But I find it more interesting that this is coming from JYP because they're all about healthy eating, right? They have reusable like air in their elevators. They have organic food in their cafeterias. JYP is all about, treating your body right. And yet they still enforce these very strict diets on them. For those of you guys that are Twice fans, you know the story of Momo, who had to go through an ice cube diet where all she ate was ice cubes because she was forced to stay under a certain weight. And in order to achieve that, she almost ceased to exist. I thought that JYP learned from their mistakes and were hopefully trying to treat their idols better. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. KG and some of the other members actually ended up suffering minor to severe injuries while practicing, and in one occasion, KG had a leg injury. Her doctor advised her to take it easy and rest so that it can heal properly, and the JYP staff told her to practice regardless, which obviously does not help. When you have a leg injury, you want to rest, but this was not the case. Interestingly enough, we actually do have private DMs that KG leaked. I guess I don't know if I could say leaked because they're in the lawsuit. We have the screenshots of the DMs directly in the lawsuit. So I guess it's officially released in this case. But these DMs give us a little bit of insight into what the other VCHA members were feeling, because they kind of go back and forth here. And we learned that the conditions that they were experiencing weren't good for any of them. They were all stressed out and they were all unhappy. One of the VCHA members even says, like, Korea was bad, but this is as bad, in reference to what they were experiencing training in LA. KG responds to this by saying, honestly, I feel like I don't even have a personality anymore, or am my own person. They changed me and I lost all my good. Another member responds, they did, all of us. I'm not confident at all. I've lost myself completely. KG even says straight up, I'm not happy, with one of the other members saying, I'm not happy either. This is not enjoyable. This is not okay. And honestly, at this point, it's terrible, because if they're not having a good time, then the music that they're gonna make is just not gonna be good either. At that point, you as the company, you're just holding them hostage. They're prisoners. Now, this next part of the story takes a serious and kind of a dark turn, so I want to be very careful about the way that I cover it. So in order to not do it a disservice, I'm just going to talk about it the exact same way that it's covered in the actual lawsuit. One of the members was developing an eating disorder, and when KG and the other VCHA members brought this up to the staff, the JYP staff kind of dismissed it and said, oh yeah, eating disorders happen all the time, it's no big deal, whatever. But this eating disorder got to the point where it was really affecting the member, and on February of 2024, this member, well, I can't say the word, so for lack of a better way of describing it, they tried to exit the lobby. I'm hoping that kind of makes a little bit of sense, but anyways, this was done by ingesting 42 NyQuil pills. That is a lot of pills, but it caused the member to vomit uncontrollably, and that's how KG found the member. Thankfully, the worst case scenario did not happen, but we shouldn't even be here in the first place. Like, you as the company, you have a responsibility to take care of your idols, especially when most of them were underage, and you failed them every single step of the way, and it could have been worse. Because if it was worse, JYP would be in such a big trouble. This would be an even crazier situation. Anyways, that's pretty much going to do it for the lawsuit. Everything else is not really relevant to what we're covering today. But like I mentioned at the beginning, JYP did respond to the lawsuit, and this is what they said. They start off by saying, we would like to address the recent lawsuit filed by Kiera Grace Matter, also known as KG, and her public statements on social media. In May of this year, KG left the group residence and initiated discussions through her legal representatives. In response, we temporarily suspended VCHA's planned activities and engaged in extensive discussions with KG's representatives to explore potential resolutions. However, recently we have not received any response from KG's representatives, leaving our legal representatives awaiting further communication. We deeply regret KG's decision to file a lawsuit and make unilateral public statements containing false and exaggerated claims. This action has caused significant harm to the other members of VCHA and JYP USA, who have been working diligently on their upcoming album and projects for early 2025. They're basically saying that she's a liar without actually saying that she's a liar, which I think is a bad response, because the majority of people are going to side with her and not the actual company. So yeah, terrible response from them. But KG would then put out her own response to their response, and she would go on to say this. I am very disappointed in the company's lack of accountability. My legal team and I are fully prepared with photographic and physical evidence to prove my allegations are factual, not exaggerated, nor false. And then she goes on to talk about how she wants to make a positive change within the K-pop music industry. Now, that being said, if she really does have a ton of photographic and physical evidence, then JYP is finished. They're cooked. This is going to be a big, massive blow to the company if they lose the lawsuit. You want to know what's interesting? A week or two before the lawsuit came out, JYP, the man himself, was getting interviewed as part of like the Mama Awards or whatever, and they asked him about VCHA specifically, which this was huge at the time because there was radio silence about the group. The company had not given out any updates on them until this interview. And at the time, it seemed very positive. JYP would go on to say that the reason they were taking so long with making new music for them was because they were trying to redefine and reestablish the sound to separate it from the Korean side and make it more American by working with American writers and producers. Now, while this may have seemed like a very positive update, I was very skeptical about it because if you really think about it, realistically, it does not take 9 to 10 months to find writers and producers that are willing to make songs for VCHA. It doesn't take that long. If JYP wanted to, they have the resources, they have the connections, they could find writers and producers tomorrow morning. They could have a list of 20 people willing to work for them tomorrow morning if they really wanted to. Even if we do give them the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, maybe it was taking them 9 to 10 months to come up with new music, it doesn't explain the radio silence or the lack of posts. So clearly something else was going wrong, and now we know what that was. This means that JYP lied. He lied straight to our faces, and now he's caught in 4K because we know the real reason. So this whole, oh nah, everything's fine, like it's all good. You might say, oh, maybe he didn't know, maybe he was unaware. But if that was the case, then he shouldn't have said anything. He shouldn't have commented about VCHA at all. Clearly he knew what was going on. He chose to omit the facts, and now we're presented with this like lame excuse that they're trying to find writers and producers. That's the same lame excuse that Hybe gave when they said that they were gonna send New Jeans on a year and a half hiatus because they were trying to find a Grammy-winning producer. No, you're not. That's not how that works. And that brings us to today. So the question now is, what happens to VCHA? I think the group is finished. I don't see a way that this group can have a future or find any kind of success given the information that we know now. Think about it this way. The comment section is going to be filled with people talking about the lawsuit, talking about KG. It's just impossible to escape it. And as a result, I think the honorable thing here, if I was JYP, the honorable thing to do here is to disband the group, shut down JYP USA, and call it a day. And by the way, JYP is still planning on making a Latin girl group using the same system that they use with VCHA. That has to be canceled. There's no way that I could trust them to make another international group like that after this. And that brings us to the end of VCHA's story for now. And I don't really know where to go from here because I'm just really disappointed in JYP and the way that they handled this entire situation. This is not the thing that you want to hear, especially because it's incredibly damaging to the company itself. It's damaging to the entire industry, but most importantly, it's damaging to the members themselves. I was never a fan of this group. I had covered them in the past and I had made a few videos on them, but one of the things that I always said was this group was handled very poorly from the very beginning. And if they were given the right training, the right circumstances, and the proper care, this group could have had a lot of potential. It's just sad because we will never get to see it now. But I'm gonna leave it at that. Let me know what you guys think about the situation down in the comments below. Remember to be respectful, take care, and as always, I'll see you guys next time.